Welcome Math 3 students, this is your week 5 lesson 1 and it's all about trig graph discoveries. You might recall that we did some trig graph discovery last week and we are going to continue working on that today. So this is trig graph discovery number 4. Just a real quick recap on the equation that we're working with here. Y equals A times the sine or cosine of B times X plus D out on the end. That D value is the midline, that's the first thing we want to find. The A parameter on the front is the amplitude, and the B parameter trapped inside with the X has to do with the frequency of the wave. And to calculate your B value, we take 2 pi divided by the period. So what happens if the x-axis is not in terms of pi? Well, let's take a look at this graph. This is the regular y equals sine of x graph. And so instead of seeing pi and 2 pi, we would see these marks just after 3 and just after 6, because remember, pi is just a number. It's about 3.14, and 2 pi is about 6.28. Widget decided to say hi this morning. Okay. So what happens then if we need to write the equation for an x-axis that is not in terms of pi? Well, we can still use the exact same formulas and the exact same process. So once again, on Delta Math, you'll be given the equation in the generic form, and our job is to fill in the blanks. So on this graph, we would like to certainly start by finding the midline, finding the D parameter. So our peak looks like it's at a height of 3 on the y-axis, and the low end is at -5. So 3 plus -5 is -2. If we find that average, it's at -1. So -1 is our midline. So our D parameter would be -1. Then from there, locating the amplitude off of the midline, how high up and how low does it get? Well, that's a distance of 4 units. So 4 is our amplitude. Then lastly, finding the B parameter, working out its frequency piece. Well, B equals 2 pi divided by the period. So starting here, we have something interesting going on. So this is a sine function. And on our starting point, instead of going up the hill and then down like a regular sine wave does, this function goes down and hits a valley first. This function is upside down. So our amplitude is not only 4, but there is a negative in front of that 4 to indicate the fact that this thing is flipped or upside down. So watch out for that as well, that we can have an upside down wave. Okay, so from our starting point, it goes down, it goes up, and then right here is where it finishes the full cycle, the full one sine wave or rotation. Well, that length or distance along the x-axis, that is 16 units, 16 units. So 2 pi divided by 16, well, we don't want to actually multiply by pi because that would give us a decimal, a crazy decimal. So if we reduce the numerical part of the fraction, 2/16 is 1/8. So pi, or 1 pi over 8, is our actual B value. And we can put that in. Pi over 8 is the B value for this function. So anytime we have a period on the graph that's in regular numbers, like 16 or 10 or 2, that indicates that our B parameter will have to have pi in it because the pi part won't be able to cancel out. So let's do one more example. Here on the back, we have a cosine graph, cosine, and that's been provided for us already. So once again, we need to find the A, B, and D parameters. So for starters, finding that midline, we have a peak at 5 and the low end is at 1. So 5 plus 1 is 6, divided by 2 is 3. The average is 3. So our midline is at 3. And that puts our D parameter at 3. Then for the amplitude, working out, okay, well, how high up and how low below the midline does this graph get? Well, that is a distance of 2 units. So our amplitude is 2. But is it positive 2 or should it be negative 2? Well, looking at the y-axis and where this graph starts, this cosine graph starts on the peak. So because it's on that hilltop, this is a regular cosine graph. It is not upside down. And then finding our b parameter starts by calculating or locating the period of this function. So from where it starts on that peak, it goes all the way down and all the way back up to its starting spot. That takes up 8 units on the x-axis. So for our b parameter, 2 pi divided by 8, since our period is 8, this would reduce to 1 pi over 4 for our b parameter. So head on over to Delta Math and try out a few practice problems. Good luck out there.